Hello, I'm the Pixel Priest, and this morning we're looking at the 7th chapter of the book, The Things He Carried by Stephen Cottrell. Jesus carried our sorrows. Nothing was too small for him, too large or too heavy. He carried the tiny, casual disappointments, the lost hopes and shattered dreams of our lifetimes. And he carried the huge, ravaging hurts where tragedy strikes. He carried the lives that are lost before they've begun, the lives cut short, lives savagely realigned by grief or injury or abuse. How can we list all this pain? How can we account for it? Only that we can see it gathered in his arms, carried. The pain of miscarriage, the sudden inexplicable tragedies, the horrors of war, the howls of grief and the empty days that follow, the stabbing intrusion of regret. Jesus cradles them. Each was held with a patient gentleness and an understanding that comes from one who's known sorrow himself. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was oppressed and he was afflicted. He carried our fears, and he knew about fear. He carried our sorrow, and he knew about sorrow. He wept at the grave of his dear friend Lazarus. He wept over the city of Jerusalem, which had turned its back on God. He embraced the lost and the lonely. He held the frightened in his arms. And he carried his own sorrow, knowing that to please God meant the displeasure of everyone else. He carried our doubts, and he'd wrestled with doubt in the Garden of Gethsemane. And gazing from the cross, he saw it all the failure and pain, and he did not make excuses. He saw us for what we are, and he loved us, and his words offered compassion, forgiveness. Not that you need to be forgiven for pain, but for all of us, sin and pain, it's muddled together. He gathered it all together and carried it. And that's our reflection for today. But there are some suggestions for our own reflection at home. One is to hold an empty basket and imagine it being filled with the fears, sorrows, doubts and anxieties of your life and of every life. Imagine all this being held, carried and understood. Imagine a love that would do such a thing. And the other is to read Romans chapter 8, verses 18 to 39 and ponder a couple of questions. How does it feel to be carried? What does it mean? And what does it mean to say Jesus shared the pain and sorrow of the world? See you tomorrow.